on Lee Martens to the stage.
Morning.
All right, so Lee is a reforestation specialist with Alberta Agriculture and Forestry, and he leads the development and implementation of reforestation standards linked to forest management objectives. So today he's going to be talking about a climate change adaptation silviculture program. So I'm going to be running the slides for Lee, so hopefully I can figure this technology out. So give me a second here and we should be good. Okay, and Lee, when you get going, just give me a signal when you want me to change. And with that, take it away.
Sure, I'll probably just say next, Brad, or something along those lines. Also like to echo Niall's comments about surely appreciate an invitation to come talk today. It's been a while since probably many of us have gotten together on the silviculture side to have a good silviculture discussion and some presentations. My presentation today is a project that we were working on and started in 2018 around just starting to put some ideas together and maybe some examples on the landscape around silviculture adaptation to climate change. This is kind of a project that piggybacks off some other work, so I'll provide some details around this project for the most part in this presentation. So next slide, Brad. I'm just going to cover off on three items today. Talk a little bit about the changing climate in Alberta, some mixed or some changes or some mixed outcomes of how trees and forests might respond to this changing climate, and then, like I said, the bulk of the presentation today will be on our project that we started in 2018 in Star Creek. So, next slide, Brad. So the climate in Alberta has changed and is expected to continue to change. Depends on where you are in the province potentially, but since the 1940s, generally, the mean annual temperature has warmed. Winters are obviously warming faster than summers, as many of us have experienced. And overall precipitation has increased by about 10%, but most of that increase in precipitation has occurred in the north, and in the south there's generally been either no change or a slight decrease. It appears that the frost-free period and the growing seasons have lengthened. As we experienced certainly this spring, snow melt is occurring earlier than the past. So, also annual potential evaporation has increased as well. So, next slide, Brad. So these trends are expected to continue. Some researchers have kind of framed some of the impacts for Alberta relative to global mean annual temperature. So for every 1 degree increase of global mean annual temperature, Alberta is expected or anticipated to warm by 1.5 degrees Celsius in summer and 2 degrees Celsius in winter. They also suggest that Alberta will remain frost-free for an additional 2 weeks and experience 5 to 10% increase in winter precipitation with little or no change in the summer. So conditions appear to be getting warmer, and depending on where you are in the province, either wetter, a little bit wetter or a little bit drier. Next slide, please. So this begs the question, as a silviculture person, as a reforestation person, how will tree species respond? I guess there's a couple of different things that could happen. There could be a decrease in survival and growth due to decreased soil moisture, an increase in drought stress, or other stressors from insect and disease or wildfire. Or there could be an increase in survival and growth due to the warmer temperatures themselves, the extended frost-free period, or the extended growing season. But couched within all this is a huge amount of variability in terms of when those frosts happen, and uncertainty about what's going to happen year after year. So, next slide, Brad, please. So, just moving on to the actual Star Creek experiment itself. You may have seen some reference to this from a hydrological perspective, but just to start, I guess I'd like to just acknowledge, because this was a partnership of various organizations to implement and get funding for this project. So just want to acknowledge, our partners were CAN4 and FRI Research, and the funding was through FRIA. For me personally, had some colleagues that worked on this project with me. Dr. Petra Albertrova, so she did a large part of the field work and the number crunching, and has also done put the results together for a publication. Also included with this was Axel Anderson. He's with the government here, but he's also co-tagged with FRI Research. And he worked on the hydrology component as well with Dr. Aldous Simmons. So Star Creek is about 1,000-hectare watershed located about 10 kilometers west of Blairmore, Alberta, in the southwest portion of the province. It's located in the montane region, and its upper reaches kind of slide into the subalpine as well. The forest type in that region is mixed conifer. It's dominated by lodgepole pine, with white spruce, Engelmann spruce, and Douglas fir as secondary components. So the elevation range for this particular watershed is from about 1,450 meters to 2,400 meters. And it's north facing. So to the left is north in this slide, and to the right is obviously to the south. So it's up there in terms of 1,400 to 2,400 meters of elevation. As I mentioned, the Star Creek watershed is part of the Southern Rockies Watershed Project, led by Aldous Simmons. The Southern Rockies Watershed Project is studying the impacts of wildfire and forest management on water quality, quantity, and ecology. So it's been up and running, I think, since about 2003, after the Lost Creek fire. The Star Creek watershed itself had forest management treatments applied. The objectives of the treatments were to reduce the canopy cover by about 30%. But it was also designed to influence snow accumulation and snow melt using different harvesting systems. So as you can see in the picture here, there's basically three. So in the foreground, right where the partners symbols are, that's the clear cut treatment, and in the middle is the strip cut, and then on the far eastern side is what we called a partial cut. Because there was the potential for maintaining moisture on the site as an objective on the forest hydrology end of it, with various levels of canopy cover, as a silviculture person, and with those numbers of around the climate is changing, getting warmer, and down here anyways potentially drier, we sort of saw this as an opportunity to explore the effects of canopy cover and microsite conditions as a means to adapt to warmer and drier conditions. So if your objective is to to capture snow and slowly release it over a longer period of time, then that could be an adaptation strategy for your next forest and your future forest. And for me, I think more than anybody else, I was also interested in applying some of the stuff that I had been reading in the literature around adaptation strategies that were put forward by Constance Miller back in 2007 around concepts of resistance and resilience and transition. So I won't get into those gory details just because of the time constraints around presentations and stuff, but certainly happy to discuss those when after the session when we go to the tables and stuff. So our approach was to relate the overstory canopy cover, microclimate, and microsite conditions to the survival and growth of both native and non-native tree species. So we were kind of interested in the treatments that had been applied, but we're also interested in kind of pushing the envelope a little bit in terms of that concept, adaptation concept around transitioning. So you're managing for future adapted species. So we want to try and include both conventional and kind of push the envelope and see if we could come up with something that might help with some concepts of adaptation in this area. So next slide, Brad, please. So we had two, for this initial phase of this project, we had two fairly, I think, basic kind of silviculture questions that we wanted to tackle. This project and some of the data that I'll show is around just two-year results so far, so kind of that establishment phase. So the initial question is related to the treatments themselves. So do early seedling survival and growth differ by harvesting treatment? So and then our second question was around is seedling establishment success tree species dependent? So we were, like I said, we kind of looked at what current species could be available, and we also looked at basically across the rocks into BC and see what else was close that we could maybe apply around that transition concept. So next slide, Brad, please. So our harvesting treatments, I kind of alluded to them already. We had three. So we had a clear cut with patch retention. So that was about, I think it was about 15% retention. I have a little star there to remind myself that this is kind of related to kind of current practice. And then the other two harvesting treatments were kind of something that's different. The second treatment is a modified strip shelter wood. So we had alternating 35-meter wide leaf and harvested strips of varying length, and they were oriented east-west. And then the third treatment was a partial cut as a distributed selection cut. So it was I mean, I think we just told they told the operators, I wasn't around then, but they told the operators just kind of leave a tree, take a tree kind of concept. So, and the harvesting treatments were done in the winters of 2014 and 2015. So, next slide, please, Brad. So those were the harvesting treatments. We also were interested in some tree species treatments. Like I said, we're looking at current tree species that were native to that region down there, but we're also interested in some tree species that were not local, but we did get them from the other side of the rocks. So there was there's 7 species total that we looked at. There was 2 from Alberta or 3 from Alberta, I guess, and 4 from BC seedlots. We kind of also picked tree species that had some level, at least medium level or tolerance levels and resistance levels to either drought, shade, frost, or wildfire. So we did have an eye on, trying to pick tree species that had some tolerance or resistance to stress. The elevation ranges, remember I alluded to the elevation range for the watershed itself. It was 1,400 to 2,400, I believe. So some of these seedlings were a little bit either a little bit outside their element or way outside their element. So and the other part of the selection process is we tried to get as much orchard or improved material as possible. And I think we were quite successful in getting some seed. The only wild seed was the ponderosa pine. So the lodgepole pine and the white spruce are orchard seed from Alberta. The Douglas fir, western larch, western white pine, ponderosa pine was orchard seed and wild seed from BC, and Siberian larch was seed from Atisk. So from orchards here in Alberta. So the various seed lots had various orchard characteristics that were selected on. The two Alberta ones were height. There was two BC seed lots that were volume based, and then the western white pine was more related to survivability at 20 years. So again, three harvesting treatments and seven seed lots effectively. So next slide, please, Brad. So we grew, back to Andy's findings, we grew these seedlings as 410 and 412 spring stock at 3 commercial nurseries in the interior of BC. We took that route because they had some experience growing those kinds of seedlings and in terms of close proximity to where our site was as well. So these were sown in 2017, grown through 2017, lifted in end of 2017, overwinter cold stored, and then available for planting in the spring of 2018. So we did the plantings in middle of June of 2018. So I'll get to the experimental design here in a sec, but we also did some root growth potential tests on those seedlings. We grabbed 10 seedlings of each seed lot and put those in single tree buckets and grew them outside for 30 days at the same time that we planted them out in the block. So we were just trying to understand what kind of stock we were dealing with and whether it was good stock to have some confidence in our field results. So the root growth potential test identified no issues at all. So this is the pine. As you'll see as we move forward, it was definitely the best stock that was available for this, and the results demonstrate that it was the best stock, the best seed lot to use out there. So, like I said, we planted in June of 2018. Each harvesting treatment had its own randomized complete block design. There was no replicate of harvest treatment, so each one's a kind of a standalone randomized complete block design. We went with a 90 seedling row plot approach. Could have done a block planting, I guess, but we went with the row plots because of the amount of variability, both in terms of canopy cover and in ground conditions. It's not flat ground, so we went with the 90 seedling row plots. We went with 90 seedlings in a row plot because I was a little concerned about, these seedlings are kind of way out of their element, or so was expecting some higher mortality. So it was good to have the numbers.
Lee, I'll just give you a 5-minute warning, okay?
Sure, sounds good. Measurements we took are the standard heights and diameters and all that kind of good stuff, but we also put out some hobo temperature loggers, and we put those in each of the sites. Next slide, Brad, please. So in terms of that kind of year, it was a 2018 when we planted was unfortunately a much drier and warm year. So those guys were plunked into some pretty tough ground and some pretty tough conditions. The second year had average precipitation and below average temperature. So those first 2 years of growth were pretty tough growing conditions. So next slide, please, Brad. Within the harvesting treatments themselves, this is some of the data from the hobo data loggers. I think the key one to look at in terms of this table is the real range in terms of temperatures that those seedlings experienced. The hobo data loggers were at seedling height, and definitely the clear cut had a higher amplitude than the partial cut and the strip cut. Next slide, please, Brad. So just some quick results here. We did a principal component analysis, so we kind of threw a bunch of data into the dishwasher and see what came out the other side. And to maybe some surprise, the most suitable site was the partial cut, and for some tree species it was the strip cut. But the least suitable for all species was the clear cut, and it was just tough conditions in the clear cut. It was windy, it was hot, it was cold, it was huge temperature ranges, so those guys were not happy. Next slide, please, Brad. However, if you kind of tease apart that strip cut, because there is a harvested strip and a non-harvested strip, the non-harvested strip became the more suitable conditions for seedling growth and survival, whereas the strip cut forested, for some tree species, the strip cut forested was least suitable, and for white spruce and Douglas fir, the clear cut was not a good host. So, next slide, please. So back to our research questions. So do early seedling survival and growth differ by harvesting treatment? Well, they do. The partial cut seemed to be more favorable than the strip cut, which was more favorable than the clear cut. We found that the optimal canopy cover was about 30 to 40%. And then to our second question, is seedling establishment success tree species dependent? The answer is yes. In terms of survival, the pine did better than the Douglas fir and the spruce, and the larches did not great. And in terms of height growth, the pines and the larches had the best height growth, followed by the Douglas fir and the white spruce. That's probably more related to the growth characteristics of those species in particular. Just fast growing versus slow growing, right? So our next steps for this is we're going to continue to do some long-term monitoring on this, and then we have a next set of measurements slated for 2022. And that is it for me. Thank you.
All right, we've got time for one question here, Lee.
Okay.
But the question here relates to this idea of this resistance, resilience, and transition framework. But could you describe how those different harvesting treatments correspond to those different resistance, resilience, and transition strategies, or perhaps they don't?
Right. I guess I would look at those in terms of in combination with the seedlings that were planted. So, I mean, a resistance kind of strategy, it relates to, kind of maintaining current character of the stands themselves. So you're trying to build the defenses in your current existing stands. The resilience is you kind of, after disturbance, you want to return it to its previous condition, but you also kind of want to climate proof it with maybe some a few future adapted species. So you want to maintain the character, but you want to also include some future adapted species, whereas the transition is you're going somewhere else. You're doing something different. So you're managing for the future. So those are kind of the basic kind of how it breaks out. Obviously, there's a certain level of expenses associated with each one of those and certain amount of risk associated with each one of those as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Lee.